Welcome to this month's recipe segment. We have the perfect spring recipe today. It's new potato and asparagus soup. So this is great for those early spring days where it's still a little bit chilly, you want something warm, but you're starting to have some newer produce come in. So I'll go over our ingredients really quick and then we'll go ahead and get started. We have two chicken breasts that are diced into 1/2 inch pieces. We have diced onion, we have olive oil, we have lemon juice and lemon zest, salt, garlic powder, vegetable broth, low-fat milk, new potatoes, asparagus, low-fat sour cream, and black pepper to taste. So that's just a quick overview, and I will let you know more about the specifics of the amounts as we get started. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and I have my skillet heated up a little bit already, so this is going to speed our cooking process along. And I'm just showing you these first couple steps because it'll need just a couple minutes to cook, and we'll talk more as it goes ahead. And this is 1 onion diced. I used a yellow onion just because that's a good neutral onion for any kind of cooking, especially soup. You can hear that sizzle in there. And then our 2 chicken breasts. And so this is what we want to add first in our pan. And this is going to need to cook for about 5 minutes, maybe a little bit less time since our pan was preheated. So while that is cooking, we can talk a little bit more about the rest of our recipe. So as I mentioned, this is the perfect springtime recipe because we're able to use asparagus and new potatoes, which are 2 Kentucky Proud produce items that are available, that are either are available or will be available this time of year. So in Kentucky, asparagus is available in April and May, and new potatoes are also available in that early spring, April time frame. Most Kentucky potatoes we see in the fall months. However, new potatoes are actually, what makes it a new potato is that it's petite, so it's smaller than the full-sized either russet or full-sized red or yellow potatoes. So any of those smaller potatoes, they're very nutritious, and the other great thing about them is you don't even have to remove the skin because it's just so tender. So that saves you a little bit of time in the cooking process as well. So I'm just going to give this a little stir so that our chicken can cook evenly here. And that smells great when you start to cook that chicken and your onions together. So we'll just let that continue to cook. We'll notice that our chicken is done when we see that when it turns white instead of the raw pink color. And then our onions will also be more translucent golden as well. So let's talk a little bit about potatoes. If you remember last month's segment, we did smashed potatoes. And I used a larger russet potato because I wanted the potatoes that were fluffy and light, good for baking and scooping out. But this time you'll notice that I'm using the red potatoes. And I did use those small new potatoes. And the difference in those is the moisture content. So the red or new potatoes are more waxy, and so they're perfect for a soup because they're going to hold their shape even when they're cooked at a higher temperature. Whereas the russet potatoes, or those larger classic baking potatoes that we think of, they tend to lose their shape when they're cooked in something like a soup. So your waxier potatoes will hold up their shape better for things like soups, roasting, salads, like a potato salad, all of those types of things is what we want to use those new potatoes for. Whoops, had an onion that tried to escape on me. And once again, today I'm demonstrating making half of the recipe, but I'm telling you the amounts that we'll use for our full recipe. That way you can be prepared whenever you try and make this at home. I'll explain a couple of the other steps that I've already done just to make this cooking process easier. We used 1 lemon, and we have the zest and the juice of the lemon. So if you didn't have a fresh lemon, You could use lemon juice that you can store in your refrigerator and have on hand at any time. You could also use the lemon peel, finely grated lemon peel that's in the spice rack. You would just maybe want to adjust your amounts a little bit. But if you have the opportunity to use that fresh lemon, it really does add a nice little flavor to our soup. Okay, so hopefully you can see that my onions and chicken are cooked. And so we'll go ahead and set that back down on the burner. But our next step is to add our spices and flavoring. So I'm going to add that lemon juice. And that's the juice from about half the lemon. We'll add our lemon zest, or our peel. Once again, we zested the whole lemon. We'll add that in. We'll also add garlic powder. This is 1/2 teaspoon. And salt. This is 1 teaspoon of salt. Now you could adjust that salt content if you wanted to. Feel free to do more or less. It is kind of based on taste a little bit. So we'll just give this a quick stir to get those flavorings mixed in with our chicken and onions as they finish up. And then next we will be adding our liquid. So this is 3 cups of vegetable broth. You can find low sodium varieties of broth in your grocery store as well. So we'll go ahead and add that in. And then we will put in our potatoes. You've noticed that I've cut these pretty small, also in about 1/2-inch pieces. 1/2 inch seems to be the way to go today. And I'm going to turn my temperature up so that these will cook a little bit faster for us. We'll move on to the next step of the recipe when the potatoes have softened up a little bit. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put my lid on to kind of get that heat up even a little bit faster. So we don't have a whole lot of ingredients left remaining, but I did want to talk a little bit about asparagus because that's something that we haven't discussed in a while. So I have my asparagus already chopped up into about 1-inch pieces, but with asparagus, we do tend to need to remove those the very bottom of the stalks when you buy them from the grocery store. So what you can do is take your full stalk of asparagus, go up maybe about 1 inch from the bottom and try and snap it. If you've ever snapped green beans, it's just like doing that. And it'll break at the spot where it needs to be removed of the woody part. So you're not going to have excess of the asparagus that you're losing. It'll snap at the perfect place that it needs to remove that hard woody part that you don't want to eat. So anyways, after you've done that, of course, we washed our asparagus first as well. I like to just line up all of mine on a cutting board and just make for a really efficient processing of the asparagus. You can just cut it up in 1-inch pieces. Just for a few fun facts, asparagus only has 22 calories per serving, which is 1/2 cup or a quarter of a pound or 4 ounces. So our recipe actually calls for 1 pound of asparagus. So I used a food scale so that I can measure that by weight. If you don't have one at home, sometimes when you buy asparagus in the grocery store, you'll be able to buy it by the pound, so you can use that scale in the grocery store if you know that you don't have one at home to get the right weight for your asparagus. After you've done it a time or two, you'll probably be able to recognize, this is what roughly a pound of asparagus looks like. Another tip is how we store asparagus. So if you have extra asparagus after you've made this recipe that you want to keep, if you want to use it later in the week, a lot of times it comes in a plastic bag. However, that is not the best way to store it long term. So if you want to store asparagus in your refrigerator, the best way is to store it upright. So with those crowns or the tops facing up. So you want to put it like this, either in a cup or a bowl or some way that it can be upright. And then either put just a little bit of water in the bottom, or you can wrap a damp paper towel around the bottom. And that'll keep asparagus fresh in your refrigerator for 1 to 2 weeks. So that's a great way to extend the life of your asparagus without those tops getting all soft and mushy in the bottom of a plastic bag or shoved in the back of your produce drawer where it's easy to forget about, which I know has probably happened to all of us from time to time. So our potatoes are starting to soften up a little bit. I'll give it just another moment before I make the rest of my additions here. So those are our facts about asparagus. It's a great vegetable to incorporate. I actually learned that you can even eat asparagus raw, which I've never tried before, but you can. You can mix that in with your carrots, with your celery, with your cherry tomatoes or other raw veggies that you might want to snack on throughout the day. But my other favorite way to cook asparagus is by roasting. So you would that's where you put it in the oven at a higher temperature, maybe 400 or 425 degrees. Brush it with some olive oil, salt and pepper to taste, and roast it. And it gets that crispy, crunchy flavor. And it is a great way to introduce asparagus to picky eaters if you have some in your family who are maybe not the biggest asparagus fan. Okay, I have our soup is boiling, so I'm gonna go ahead and reduce my heat back down just a little bit, and I'm gonna slowly stir in our low-fat milk. This is 1 cup, and so I'm just gonna stir, and you'll see that it kind of stops that boil as I add that in. And then we'll also add in our asparagus at this time. The asparagus takes less time to cook than the potatoes do, so that's why we've waited and not added those in at the very same time. And so we can kind of get that all mixed around. And usually from this point forward, it takes a maximum of 15 minutes more for your soup to be done. But thankfully, we do have some finished product already to show you. But I will go ahead and add in our last couple of ingredients. So we've mixed in our asparagus. And we also have black pepper, I mentioned to taste. So I would probably recommend putting in about 1/2 to 1 teaspoon, whatever your preference is. And then our low-fat sour cream. Now this will give it a very creamy texture. So it makes this soup seem like something a lot more rich. Even though it is a low-fat recipe, this will give it that creamy texture that we all love in those potato soups and those hearty, comforty soups that we have. So at this point, we have our heat on about medium if you're following along. And we're just gonna put our lid on and let this simmer. But as our friend Barry Hyatt always says, by the magic of TV, we have a finished product to show you of what our soup looks like after it has simmered, and it smells delicious. So if you enjoyed watching this recipe today, we hope that you'll try it at home. You can get today's recipe by emailing barry.hyatt@nctc.com. You can also find it at plateitup.ca.uky.edu or by searching Plate It Up Kentucky Proud on Facebook to find this recipe and many others. Once again, my name is Kelly Burgess. I'm the Family Consumer Sciences Extension Agent here at the University of Kentucky Extension Service in Allen County. So we hope that you have a happy spring and enjoy your recipe.